Any apologies? I have one here from Councillor Barry Stewart, and I believe everyone else is present. Can I have a move of the apology be accepted, please? Ian Pottinger, and seconded from Mayor Rob Scott. Are there any declarations of interest for the meeting today? Appear to be none. First item on the agenda is the confirmation of minutes of the Waste Advisory Group meeting held on Monday the 26th of June. Are there any questions, errors or omissions that people wish to raise in relation to those, please? There appear to be none. Can I have a mover and a seconder that they are a true and correct copy?
Yeah, I'll move that.
Thank you, Ian, and a seconder. That's from Mayor Ben Bell. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. The next item on the agenda is Enviro Schools, and we have a presentation, a copy of which appears on your agenda at page 21. So if the two people come forward, please, to the chairs and make your presentation, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My name is Josh Sullivan. I'm Senior Education Advisor at Environment Southland.
Yes, and Leonie Grace. I'm a Senior Pollution Prevention Officer from Environment Southland.
So today we just wanted to discuss the opportunity to work closer with our district councils around the waste education that we're already doing within our schools. So just to start off, we just want to acknowledge the support we have received over the last 20 years. That's through all our district councils, giving us that funding to continue our program and keep growing and developing as we have. To the point now that we've got 56 Enviro schools that are sort of we work with on a regular basis. Today is to discuss how we can sort of work closer together within the waste space. We realise that waste education is a big part of our program, and it's also a growing area. So we'd just like to discuss if there's opportunities of ways that we can work closer and look for more funding to increase our capacity to get more facilitators to work right across Southland. So right now within the Enviro School space, we've got 5 theme areas that we work to. So waste is one of those. And so for every school that we work with, we have a folder full of that information. And so we can be working with school teachers, students, and community groups alike to be sharing some of the resources that we have available. So when we work with these schools, we're trying to put time into the teaching staff, the board of trustees and the principal, so everyone has a holistic approach to how waste management can look within the school, and we're hoping that'll spread into the wider community. Each school works over on a journey, so they work from 1 to 8 years as part of the Enviro Schools program. We aim to be spending around 3 days per week within schools right across Southland. So that's including schools down at Half Moon Bay right up to Fiordland. And so right now we have 2 full-time facilitators working 37.5 hours a week. But as you can imagine, that's a lot of work for 2 people. Because the Enviro Schools is a national program, we've got around 135 facilitators working around the country. So we've got great opportunity to work with some other facilitators that have got just as much experience as ourselves. And so we can feed into the educational resources that we have available on our websites and talking to those other facilitators. So we've got a great opportunity to network and grow the program just by the support we're already receiving on a national level. As well as leaning on some of our other facilitators, we can also run a number of workshops. And for those people who've had a look at our PowerPoint presentation, we can run workshops in the waste space for caretakers, teachers, students, and community members alike. So our largest event is our regional hui, and that attracts around 200 students per year to those towards the end of the year. And we also run a number of smaller workshops during the year as well for students and teachers alike. I think it's time to hand over to any questions on the program.
Any questions? Ian?
Thanks, Chair. Look, one of the biggest problems we face with recycling is contamination.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep hearing about education. We need to educate the public. Now, obviously, Enviro Schools goes through the schools. Now, what are you guys doing, or are you the appropriate mechanism to educate, obviously, kids who can educate their families? Now, it's about how to recycle, about the cleanliness, what products, mainly about cleanliness. That's the problem we're getting. We're getting horrific stuff being dumped in the yellow bin.
Right.
And it's a shocker.
Yeah.
Now, I'm all favour of a more drastic policing sort of thing where you inspect bins and you red card people, but I've been asked to sit back and look at education.
Right.
And to me, that's a good way of educating people. You do it with parking fines, and they seem to learn. But anyway, getting back to kids, so have you got anything in your program that tells them how to do proper recycling, like wash out your milk bottle, clean all the meat trays, keep it clean?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So we work with early childhood centres. So our education starts at in the early childhood centres. So our facilitators, we've got 5 different facilitators here. So we're working at the youngest age groups right through to primary, and we've got transitional resources and then into secondary school. So in those beginning stages, we are talking to those young tamariki, but we're also sending letters home as well. So you're informing the students.
What age group is that? Sorry.
So the early childhood. So you're sort of 1 to 5, and then you sort of and
that's
then
a bit young, yeah.
That is young, but you remember you also have the opportunity to feed into the parents,
right?
Because they're coming in regularly. We run events, and we're always asking parents and community members to come along to those events. Plus, we're sending information home to them as well. And so that's in the early stages, but then that information then feeds into the primary school, which we're doing a lot more time into. And so we're working with the students, and again bringing in the parents to those.
So you have material.
Yep. So each school, each teacher gets a folder like that.
Yeah.
And so I've got.
And are they teaching it?
So we teach it, and then
so it is actually being taught.
Yep.
Cleanliness, everything like that.
Yep. Yep. So you should be able to go into one of our Enviro schools and just talk about, what are you doing? What does it look like? What does waste look like? What does waste management look like? And they should be able to talk about that.
So obviously schools have their own recycle bins. So do they practice what they preach? Do you, it's a great thing.
Yeah.
They should be able to take their recycle bin into a classroom, dump it on the floor, and it should be nice and clean, and put it back in again.
Yeah, so, we can do waste audits. And so it's that opportunity to go, well, where is this waste coming from? How are we creating waste, and what do we do with it? And so that is part of that education of breaking it down, going, where is the largest volume of waste coming from right now within the school space? And so it's making sure that students are aware, and teachers and the community is aware of where that waste is. So that is part of the program.
And my last question is, WasteNet has a budget for education.
Yep.
And that's why I asked about you being the appropriate mechanism for us to invest in. Do you, with more funds, could you actually achieve more?
Well, I can show you what we're achieving now. We've got concrete evidence, and I'll put that in the PowerPoint of what we're achieving now with with 2 facilitators. But you've got to remember, Environment South, and from the point of view of Environment Southland, we've got 200 staff, and this is our strength: is that there's only the 2 of us in the full-time role as educators, but then we can lean on science, monitoring, biodiversity. We've got 200 other staff that we work very closely with and come and support the program. And so that's what we're saying, is that if the opportunity to work closer together, we can expand the program through what we've already got from an Environment Southland point of view, the staff there.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, Rob?
Just one on the, I see you've got sort of under half of the schools. Do you have capacity to do more of the schools, or are you kind of peaked out with those two staff?
You're right now, with the amount of time that we're spending in schools, we would be at capacity just by the time we run workshops and supporting the schools we already have. And so, you know, if you're talking about 12 to 15 schools that we're supporting, then, you know, that's a busy space in terms of supporting, you know, not just the students, but the board of trustees, the principals, and the staff as well. So, yeah.
Are they a reasonable spread around?
Yep. So we've got schools in Gore, Fiordland, Stewart Island. So we try our best to cover all of Southland.
Christine?
Thank you. Thank you, Josh, for your presentation. I was able to go to one of your courses where you brought a number of schools together last year out at Tangaroa, which was, really informative. Thank you. Yep. The question I have is, I notice the increasing litter around the sides of our roads, and I wonder what the relationship is to what we're seeing, to what you're teaching at the, early childhood, but also at the school level for the students. Yeah. Thinking the long-term kind of outcome as well.
Yeah. So we are looking at it from a holistic point of view. You may remember we had a strong microplastics program with WasteNet as the last few years. And so we're looking at waste not only on the sides of the roads, but also in our waterways. And so there's a huge amount of learning and education that has to be done across Southland. I'm the first one to acknowledge that. But, you know, trying to find those opportunities to work with those teachers and those schools to show them the amount of waste that's already within our community and how to reduce that is part of what we're offering in those schools. And so we can give you examples of a handful of schools that are doing an amazing job with waste management, but it's probably small scale if you're talking across Southland. So it's an opportunity to increase what we're all doing, you know, with the resourcing that we have. Because right now our program is limited to how much resourcing we can put into those schools and run the larger programs as well, or the Interview Hui that you came along to. So we've got all the resources here, but it's a staffing issue that we're facing to do more to reduce the amount of waste that we're seeing across Southland.
This question, I guess, comes from lack of knowledge, but to what extent do you work in with the staff of the other councils or with the WasteNet focused staff of Invercargill?
It has been in a limited capacity. I know there's been a number of staff changes, and so I started this role when Donna Peterson, I think it was just leaving. So most of the work has been sitting alongside the Polytech, which had already a close relationship with WasteNet. So it was a link through that. So right now I'm working with Jackie Nelson. So I haven't had too much opportunity to work alongside WasteNet yet, but I'm hoping that's going to change in the future.
So are there some areas where we can be of assistance to you?
So from what I've been reading so far, you've hired Waste Free Wander, and so because Waste Free Wander is coming in to do waste education from out of Southland, we see ourselves as working alongside what she's already delivering, and so that's the presentation that she's got set up across Southland. And so because that's sort of stepping into school, stepping out, in the background, we are the ones that are sort of coming in, working 2 to 3 days a week with those schools that that Waste Free Wander is already working in. So we can build up cementing that relationship, reinforcing what Waste Free Wander is already talking about, and help schools deliver some of those messages that partnership is already, Waste Free Wander is already offering. So we see us strengthening what is already being delivered.
Any other feedback?
Sorry, just for clarification on that. So, are you suggesting that it would be better to invest more into Enviro schools than Waste Rwanda, and you guys would pick up their program? Is that?
So
It can be brutal. That's
yeah. No, it's a good question. It's a good question. So we're asking for funding for another facilitator to sit alongside what we're already delivering. Because the challenge is when you've got someone coming from out of town, my personal point of view is that's going to be there's limited capacity in terms of making sure that message is going to be delivered right across Southland on a long-term basis. There is impact for that then and there when that person's doing the presentation, but we're working in schools for a number of years, so we're doing that long-term relationship building, which is crucial for whatever you're teaching, is making sure that those students are really aware who you are, how you operate in those messages, so they feel comfortable to ask those questions. And that is why EnviroSchools has been operating for 20 years down here, because we've built up long-term relationships with the schools that we've been in.
Christine?
Thank you for your honesty.
Thank you. I'm just wondering from what you're indicating that we're at risk of providing a lot of support into the same schools, and there's a huge gap out there where schools for various reasons find it difficult to be involved. And if that's the case, what is it going to take, or how would I guess that issue be resolved?
Yeah, so we offer EnviroSchools as one part of our education program. The other part is we offer environmental education, like holistic environmental education. So any school can contact us, which they do, and we can go into those schools and offer a program around waste or pest control or biodiversity. And so we've got sort of three main arms of education that we offer, which is EnviroSchools, environmental education, and we've got a planting site down at the Waihopai that we plant on. And so we invite any schools along to planting days, but we can also run programs for waste education for any school, and we've got schools that are contacting us on a daily basis that sit outside EnviroSchools that we offer programs to. And that, again, we can do that because we've got those 200 odd staff at Environment Southland that support us in that space.
Ian?
I can't resist this opportunity. I see there's an item there on microplastics.
Yes.
Now, right, you're aware that out at AB Lime, they take their leachate and it currently goes to our wastewater treatment plant.
Mm-hmm.
They've proposed a scheme where they can remove, through some scientific method, remove the microplastics.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to get consent to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you guys in favour of that?
I'd need to learn more about it. Like, this is the first time I've heard that. So, yeah,
I'm asking the question because there could be a problem there.
Right. I mean, Leonie might be able to speak to that more. Do you know more about it?
No, I'm not involved in that part of it at all.
Would you would see it as a good thing?
To
Take the
remove
microplastics out, because obviously down at the wastewater treatment plant they can't.
Well, it can't be a bad thing to remove your microplastics.
No, you would think that if they were doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that consent process is, in a different department to us, and then it would rely on the AEE that goes with the application.
Right.
It is incredible, though, when we are working with community groups and schools, the lack of knowledge and information around microplastics in waterways. And so, part of the program we were running with Te Pukenga and other community groups is just understanding microplastics and how it's getting into our waterways. Like, there's a huge amount of lack of knowledge around that, because it's just making the invisible visible, and that was why that program was such a success, because people were starting to realise just how much plastic was in there that they just couldn't see.
Oh, I totally agree, and it was a shock to me when we learnt about it.
Yeah.
As well. Now, I'm just wondering why Environment Southland may not want to hold it up. That's all. But you're obviously a different department.
Different department, so it's hard to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Had to ask a question.
Any further comment from comment over the staff question?
Thanks, if that's okay. I know you're working with Jackie, but I just thought it might be worth just having a discussion here. You spoke about the fact that there's some other councils that are asking you around waste-specific programs. My understanding is generally Enviro Schools is quite a broad program with quite a lot of a Three Waters sort of initial focus. Do you actually have any waste-specific programs that are up and running for other councils at this stage, or is that just something that you're looking to step into?
So we have, so through our theme areas, we've got a full program in there that you can already deliver. So teachers can pick up that, they can choose the zero waste theme area, and they can have actual examples of how to deliver that in the classroom if we're not there. And so what we're trying to show is that we can open the door, we can show them those resources and how to use them, but then we're handing it back to the teachers in those schools so that they can deliver that program, because we just don't have the capacity to be going around all of the schools, but we've got the resources available for them to use them themselves.
So what I guess I'm questioning is, if you had more resource, what would that mean differently in how you would deliver waste programs as opposed to the broader Enviro Schools program? So
that would look like getting across more schools, or there may be areas within Southland that we really need to target. Is there certain schools that require a lot more support, and so you could put more time into those schools to really target the waste issues that are down there. Or it could be that we run more larger scale presentations, so we can bring in 200 to 300 students at a time, and look at some of the solutions around waste management.
That would appear to take care of all the questions that people have. So Josh and Leonie, thank you for coming in. I think that is an informative reinforcement of some of the work that you've been doing for a long period of time. So we have a recommendation in the report that that the information be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder on that, please? Rob moved, Ian seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. So thank you, Josh. Thank you, Leonie.
Thank you very much for your time.
We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which appears at page 39, which is an update on the waste action. On page 32, the waste to landfill performance data. So there is a report that's been circulated. Since the report came out, is there any additional information the staff need to draw to our attention? No. Any questions arising from that report, please? Ian.
Look, just curious around the figures for waste diversion from landfill, and Gore is a shining light there when it comes to clean fill. Now, obviously, there's a big project going on that you've got clean fill, and you found a site for it somewhere, and that's counted as waste diversion, or seems an unusual one, clean fill, to actually have there. But obviously, some people send it to landfill. Can I have a bit more detail on that? It just stands out.
Core staff able to help, please?
Thank you, through the chair. You said our closed landfill site at the Gore transfer station, we are undertaking a rehabilitation program for that, and so a lot of the clean fill from our district goes to there and is used to rehabilitate that site and fill some of the lower areas, with a plan to make that a biodiversity area that can be used by residents with walking paths and stuff going through it. So it's been a process that's been ongoing since our landfill closed.
I mean that's really good, but it's also alarming to know that and the question has to be asked: does ICC and SDC have places that clean fill can go to? Projects? Do we have that? I mean, there should be none going to landfill. Do we have available? If you've got a construction site with clean fill, and they ring up, where can I dump this? Do we have that?
Yes, so from ICC's perspective, ICC uses the landfill at Timpanies for clean fill type items. We did used to take more out there, but with tightening up around clean fill regulations about 6 months ago, we started reducing what we were taking out there. Something that we want to look at more for ICC, though, is how our transfer stations can be developed to do more of that diversion, not just clean fill, but more broadly. I don't think that we're diverting as much at the transfer stations as we could potentially could be. So a piece of work that we need to do for ICC.
So just to get this right, can someone please explain what clean fill actually is? You know, because I've got a mixed view in my mind.
I'm not a clean fill expert, but there are legislative guidelines that are put out by MFE around exactly what clean fill consists of. The example I'd give is that we used to clean fill once upon a time the crushed glass. We're not able to do that anymore because it doesn't meet the MFE definition. It's something that I need to circulate after the meeting, though, as it is quite complicated. I don't have a very simple answer for you, Councillor.
It's just that obviously if we've got graphs and figures and data on it, it's nice to know. I mean, it's a standout thing. We're saying we're diverting it, but we don't know what it is. So that's what I'm trying to find out. What is it we're diverting? You know, what is the actual product?
Yep, so I can circulate what is the definition of clean fill after the fact.
Yeah, because it's hard to imagine someone dumping a whole load of soil into a landfill.
Just on a quick Google search, clean fill comprises of dirt, cement, concrete, gravel, brick, topsoil, sand, and rubble.
Yeah, so it sounds like, yeah.
And
that's
excludes degradable materials, so green waste and the like.
Yeah. So I imagine that. Yeah, if you cleaned a site like you're doing at Gore with that, reconstructing that, it's all usable. So I'm just trying to work out what clean fill. Obviously, we are sending, like for ICC, 53 tonnes to landfill.
Yeah, maybe Grant can cast.
Yeah, just in Southern District Council, we don't have a lot of green fill sites, very few, but we're looking. That'll be part of our AMP discussions. A lot of people actually just get consents for green fill sites.
Clean fill.
Clean fill, sorry, where they can. And so there'll be contractors, for instance, doing roading and the like. They'll go and find a site, go to whichever council is appropriate and get a consent to dump that material, and that keeps it out of a landfill because it's so expensive. So they try to do it that way.
Okay, so obviously with Erin's point, you have to have that analysed. Someone would have to go, yeah, it meets clean fill. It meets these regulations that came in 6 months ago. You can't just go and dump it.
It's more around the clean fill sites have been, I guess, getting a little bit more up to speed around what's acceptable to stay within their consent limits. So that's where the discussions for ICC were prompted, was actually through the clean fill landfill that we were going to, starting to reduce what they were accepting.
Right. Okay.
And I guess the positive thing to note, I guess, in the Gore situation is that it's been channeled in a way that's of benefit, helping tide up that site. And also in terms of that report, it acknowledges, contrary to what's recently been in the paper, that Gore does do recycling of a number of different products. So any other questions arising from the report?
Just on that clean fill, just to clarify, so that doesn't attract any of the levies. Is that a safe assumption? Or are there still levies payable on clean fill?
Jason, able to help us there? I would think that since it's rehabilitation of the site that it wouldn't.
I think it's more the question is whether if it's going to landfill, then you're still going to be paying charges on those levies. So ideally, you wouldn't be sending it if you can. But
all right. Any other feedback, Ian?
Yeah, just still on there. So obviously flood protection, we've got flood banks all along our rivers and bits and pieces, but we're not completely finished yet. So wouldn't that be an appropriate use for clean fill? You know, and have a program that, and it's free. I mean, it provides a solution for the person who's cleared a site, but it provides a fix for us where we're not having to try and dig up new material. So have we got flood protection plans and stuff still in our pipeline?
I think, and I don't want to speak on behalf of staff, but I think flood banks are incredibly complicated in terms of what material they need to contain.
Yeah.
Flood protection, you can't take in gravels and mud and soil, so that's quite a different technique to
Okay, right. No, that's cool.
engineer.
Right.
All right. Any other feedback? Appears to be none. So we have a recommendation that the report be received and the Waste Advisory Group note the waste to landfill and recycling data and trends. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Mayor Ben and Ian seconder. All those in favour say aye.
Right.
Against, carried. Item 6, which is page 39, is an update on the waste action plans. Just through to page 39. Is there anything further from staff wish to add to the report? Yes.
I'd just like to introduce this particular report. We've had a few comments made around not just the elected members on the Waste Advisory Group, but also of the councils in general, still not being quite clear around what WasteNet is actually delivering at the moment. All of these activities are in the waste activity plan, but plus a little bit more. But we thought that it was probably worth trying to pull together a reasonably simple couple of pager that brought the key items front of mind and a quick update on those. I guess we'd be interested for any feedback around whether that's helpful.
Any comments and feedback, Ian?
Just going to the bottom left-hand box on organics business case. Now, can you talk me through, please, the application form is now complete and ready for filing? What? I'm just trying to understand what that is. What's an application form and where does it get filed?
So we spoke at the last WasteNet meeting, apologies, we could have included some more detail there, about the fact that we needed to finalise the application for funding with MFE. That's the application for that funding. We can receive up to 75% funding from MFE to complete that business case.
Okay, and the business case is for what? Obviously, policies sent to consultant. So this is about.
So this is around a organics strategy for Southland, focused on essentially how we would potentially collect that, but very much focused around what that secondary processing would look like. Once, as we know at the moment, central government have set that timeline out for collection of food waste. What we need to do as Southland councils is decide once that that collection comes into force, what actually happens to our organics once we collect it. So do we wind up with a digester-based plant? Do we go to, composting, tunnel-type systems? It's also a large piece of work that is, I guess, being completed by councils around the country at the moment as councils attempt to move food waste and organics in general out of landfills. From our perspective, although we're not an early adopter in Southland, there are other private enterprises at the moment that are interested in what they can do to divert their own green waste, and they are coming to WasteNet asking for guidance in that space. One of the key things for us is to be able to do some initial work, at least in that space, so that we're able to give some good direction for where Southland would like to go in this space.
Okay, just that that obviously, okay, we got 2030 from the government's point of view, but in our discussion with the public and our consultation for LTP, it was clearly fed back to us that the people of Invercargill don't really want a separate bin. They're saying, hey, we're keen to compost. We're keen to be proactive in this and not have to pay because it's going to cost to put it in a collection bin, and then it goes off to some company or something who turns it into compost, you know, and sells it. So our feedback is no, we don't want to do that. We want a community-based thing. So are we in our plans? Are we looking at the community-based option? Otherwise, these, you know, having consultation with the public is pretty pointless if we don't follow on what they're asking for.
So WasteNet will obviously, the WasteNet staff will take the direction from WasteNet governance around what we want to do in this space. I guess at this stage, staff's direction has been around, there is a legislative mandate at the moment that we're working to. Whether that changes in the future may or may not be the case. But at the moment, whilst there is 75% funding on the table, there was money that was put into the budget for WasteNet at the start of the year to fund that remaining money and do a business case. As it's currently sitting in the action plan and in the budget, staff are progressing with it at this stage unless we get advised to do otherwise.
Okay, I'm just wondering how our LTP feeds into WasteNet. You know, obviously all those discussions we've had, does that feed in, you know, through our...
It feeds in from the 3 different councils. Will obviously, staff who are working together will bring the different perspectives of their different councils. But at the moment, it is a WasteNet activity until we're told otherwise.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other, Rob, then Christine?
Just a further question to that. Look, so would there be potentially funding available for local initiatives for the likes of composting via WasteNet? Is that something that may...
You'll see that there's a later paper around community grants. We have started that process and that could fund initiatives like that. However, I'd note it's only a $50,000 grant program at the moment, so there's not a huge amount of money available at this stage.
So is that $50,000 in total or per application?
In total for the entire program. And
that's what we approved in the budget.
And just a further question, just while I'm here, not related to that, but that waste-free Wanda, just given that first presentation that we had, and I haven't had a chance to actually look at the schools that are, whether we've got double handling of waste-free Wanda and Enviro South going to school, and there's another school potentially missing out on both. So I just wonder if it's worth looking at the schools that we're actually focusing on, some of the schools that don't have the Enviro South link, so we're getting a wider cover of the education piece. Or whether it's too late to make any of those changes, if they are required.
So as Josh from Environment Southland advised, he's currently linking in with Jackie Nelson, who works for WasteNet. Jackie's got the waste-free Wanda schools scheduled, and then she'll be linking in with Environment Southland. As I noted though, at the moment the Environment Southland program is a lot broader program than just waste, but you're right, regardless it would be nice if they were not targeting the same schools and we were able to get that broader diversion, and we'll work with Environment Southland to see if we can achieve that, noting that WasteNet's not currently funding them though.
Good point. Christine?
Thank you. I just want to note it's positive to see the report here on the battery disposal facility, given what we heard at AB9 with the risk, not to just the machinery, but to also people operating that machinery. I guess it's not only Southland that will be looking at options around battery disposal.
If you just have the mic close up.
Elsewhere. So I'm not sure if everyone heard that or not.
Yeah, and I think there's quite a few of these schemes that are being run with in partnership with private enterprise like Mitre 10 around the country. Unfortunately, it hasn't seemed to reach as far south as Southland, which is where we need to get that moving down here. So that's the one of the pieces of work that the team are focused on at the moment.
Thank you, that would be good, and that would possibly look at other options rather than transportation to Christchurch, but somewhere nearer.
It's around who can actually process the batteries at end of life and where the nearest place to do that is, because they are still a hazardous material.
Thank you.
Ian?
About curbside standardisation for recycling. Now the government have said 1, 2, and 5. Is this a solid rule, or do we have flexibility? Because with this plant at Makarua, that Recycle South they have the ability to take 4, grade 4. Now, where does the government sit on us being?
So at the moment, the legislation's been put in place so that we can be sure across the country, I guess, that everybody is collecting the same thing, and so that it doesn't matter whether you've just moved from Christchurch, where you were putting your recycling out, and then moved to Southland, your recycling looks the same in both places. Through the consultation process on this, councils did submit around the fact that obviously there's unique situations in different parts of the country around what can be recycled where. And I guess there's still the opportunity for us to recycle via drop-off points, those other items. And obviously Recycle South have the ability to recycle more than just those plastics 1s, 2s and 5s. But at the moment, that would have to be a separate collection to the mixed recycling bin once those new requirements come in.
Serious. I mean, that just seems ludicrous from the MFE that they've gone 1, 2, 5, and it's a bit short-sighted to not realise that, you know, these plants, and it's not to say that a plant similar to the one at Makarua is going to be set up somewhere else in the country, or maybe even more. It just seems totally against what they're trying to achieve to say, no, it must be 1, 2 and 5, and you can't do 4. If you want to do 4, you've got to take it yourself, drive somewhere, and put it in a separate slot as opposed to your yellow bin. Now, because obviously we're going to be rebranding the labelling on our bins to instruct people, and we'll be just saying 1, 2 and 5. Is that what you're saying?
Once that standardisation process comes in, yes, we'll be saying 1, 2 and 5. My understanding, not being a plastics expert, but my understanding is that 1, 2s and 5s make up very much the lion's share of the plastics in most recycling bins around the country. And I have seen some interesting graphs before around when you take out those other categories of plastics, that you don't actually drop a significant amount in that recycling tonnage overall. I understand it's also to do with if you can move plastics into just their one type of plastic, then it's much easier to have a market for those than if you have bales of mixed plastics. And so I understand that's also been part of the driver from MFE behind trying to simplify that message of recycling less well, rather than trying to potentially recycle everything to a lesser standard.
And if you recall, Ian, at our last meeting, MFE made a presentation and they demonstrated quite an inflexible approach on several fronts when it came to the provisions that have been put in for collection of different types of waste.
Oh yeah, no. I've dealt with MFE for the last 13 years. So. Yep, no, that's fine.
Rob?
Just a further question on the battery disposal. When you're discussing Mitre 10, I assume that's Mitre 10 around the whole region. So we've got Te Anau, Winton, Gore and Invercargill, and not just the one in Invercargill? Or
No, that's right. We're looking at it regionally around how many we can get on board. Not saying that we're necessarily going to be able to get that in every MITRE 10, but as many as we can.
That's great, thank you. And I guess just a final comment from me, noting the recent inference in the media that WasteNet's not actually doing anything, and there's 8 work streams sitting here in front of me that I think indicates different to that, and yeah, just acknowledge the staff and the work that is being done. I think it's
Thank you. Any other comments? Ben?
Just around the separate glass collection investigation, just for Gore, considering we do separately collect glass standard at the moment, is that investigating a collection of plastics for us, or is it just how do we fit into that investigation?
Through the chair, so yes, we'll be working with BCL in terms of, for us, Gore moving our glass to a blue bin and our mixed recycling back to the yellow bin to achieve consistency across the region.
Right, can I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation the report be received, please? Rob and Ian seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 8, that was on page 39. Sorry, that's 6. I need to get my glasses cleaned. 7, WasteNet Education Community Activity Updates on page 42. Any further update from staff in terms of since that report? None. Any questions coming from the floor, please? Ian?
Look, the waste isn't getting any cleaner. So what do we need to do? The recycling.
And this is really a significant issue that Invercargill have identified before,
Oh,
isn't it,
absolutely.
in terms of
And
the contamination that's occurring. And from our previous meetings, we've discussed probably twofold approach. One is education, and the second is enforcement.
well, the education's not working.
Yeah, so we need to look
Well,
further at the.
I don't know. I thought we had another 6 months of education. We were told. Can I have just a timeline on when education becomes end of life, or we need to double up with enforcement? Because the education's not working.
My understanding was that when it came up, the indication was that a period of a number of months is required before, or once a new system is being adopted, to bring people up to speed prior to taking more enforcement action. So step by step, what you've, and that's with the system we've got now, and moving forward with further bins, further education is required from that. Is there anything staff want to add to that? I think in terms of the discussion we're having later, there's an issue there that does need to be talked about, but Jason?
Yeah, I guess just from an outsider's point of view, coming into and seeing the WasteNet operations from a staff level, I think it's important to note that we've only sort of recently had Jackie back in the role, or Jackie come into the waste education space, and since then there had been nobody in that position you're in, and so I guess to say that things aren't working, I mean it's only really just kicked into gear. I think it's there. Look, I'd certainly agree. There's an ongoing issue around contamination, but we're going to struggle to change that overnight just through education. I get where you want to go with the in terms of the fact there's a stick component to that also, but I think it's hard to say that we're going to see that there will be a bit of lag time in terms of the work that Jackie's starting to drive in the community through this year's business plan to try and achieve some positive outcomes from an educational point of view.
So in 2011 we had enforcement, and we had this and education at the same time. But for some reason, the enforcement component fell away. I mean, we've previously had it, and I'm not sure
It was under the Invercargill City Council bylaw for solid waste that was enforced at the
No,
time.
was at waste net level.
There is a waste net policy in place, but the Invercargill City bylaw has lapsed. And what you're indicating is that there is a need for all three councils to have in place an up-to-date
I
bylaw.
wasn't aware that we stopped bin inspections for that reason.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've got the education program for 23-24, as we discussed, I think, at the last meeting, and we're going to go into bin inspection again in the 24-25 year. That's how we put out our financials in our education and bin inspections, and we're getting some data so we know where to go and have a look. Once we get some good data through Jackie and the team, we'll know which parts of town and parts of the province are the big offenders, and then we'll go do some work there. But we've got to get some data to know where to go and hit first.
Okay, so the actual bin inspection process, would that be done? Obviously, if you do it with in-house, and it used to be in-house, ICC did it. I don't know what happened with Gore and SDC, but then there's been an offer from a separate contractor to do it on our behalf. Now, which line are you looking at?
There's a couple of pieces to this. One is around and I'm not exactly sure of how we enforced it in 2011, but one of the concerns that we've spoken about at the waste net table is that there are councils around the country that are taking quite a stern approach to contamination, to the point where they're taking away people's bins and people have to pay a fine to get their bin back if they're not doing the right thing. There's been a lot of work that's been done by other councils, which we are confirming for us in Southland at the moment, around the legal enforceability of doing that, because we obviously want to make sure that anything that we do is actually backed up and legal, that we're not making empty threats. So that's another piece of work that we currently have underway at the moment, is around what that would look like to make sure that it is actually enforceable. But also, to the point that we've discussed previously, we're kicking off a new education campaign. As staff, we had put forward the view that we needed to essentially educate people about the fact that you need to wear seatbelts before you go and start ticketing people for not wearing seatbelts. We wanted to take the same approach to waste, and we set the budget up in response to that. Obviously, staff can be instructed to take a different approach if required.
So I still need clarification, if possible, around, were we doing it correctly at the start back in 2011? Keith has alluded to a policy or a bylaw we had that's lapsed. Now, other councils do it, so they must. And what about SDC and Gore? Do they need to? Is this a waste net thing, or is this an ICC thing?
So each council holds its own bylaw. Ideally, what we would like to do, and we would be looking to do next year, is to start to bring alignment between those different bylaws, so that everything looks the same. And then similarly, to be able to do what enforcement steps we would take in alignment across waste nets, so that everything is as consistent as possible across Southland. I mean,
it seems crazy that MFE have the audacity to say and dictate 1, 2, and 5 with plastics and this and that. Surely the MFE, being a government department, must be able to, if you want to shift from province to province and still have the same rules, surely a nationwide rule on contamination would make sense, and the laws backing up councils to do it would make sense. It seems that this sort of fine print and hidden legal sort of black hole seems a real problem, and doesn't, like the MFE. I mean, do we need to ask them? What the hell? I mean,
I'm not sure under what legislation government could actually introduce some blanket law rules.
Well, they're telling us to put 1, 2, and 5 in.
In terms of the enforcement side of it. because where there's a bylaw, then the provisions of the Local Government Act apply. But there is certainly a conversation we need to have around the table once we proceed through the bylaw stage, and it is provided for in the current budget to look at the bylaw afresh. But as part of that, we need to have a discussion around the table as to whether the enforcement of individual bylaws, my understanding is each council must have its own bylaw, but we can act jointly in the way that we process the bylaw and the way we administer it. We need to be talking around the table in terms of the way enforcement is undertaken, and there needs to be a consistent approach to that across the region. So I think what you have highlighted are issues that we need to work through this year, and they're noted in the minutes that have been taken.
So the last part of the question, just waiting on the answer for, was getting through all the bylaw stuff. Would this process of inspection be done by council staff or by subcontractors?
That's something that, in terms of our budgets, we need to be looking at. And should it be done under the umbrella of WasteNet, or should it be done as individual councils? Again, that's something that we need to discuss around the table, and can't really make a decision on here today without having all the information in front of us.
Well, I'm hearing early 2024 for this. Is that right?
Because we don't have in our annual plans at present provisions for additional bins. So we'll be looking at the next financial year at the earliest that we can start to do it. And as part of that, then we need to have a program in place for the education. And we also need in place by that time a common bylaw. Any other comments? Thank you. Rob?
Just a quick comment on the education piece. Just we've got a publication that goes out to every single ratepayer called First Edition, and it might be worth putting something in there from our side to actually start getting some of that messaging across.
Yeah.
And I think just further to that, Mr. Chair, as we've staged our LGP program around the number of people we've actually got on WasteNet to do the work that's required and getting asked of us. There's only a very small number of people involved in this compared to other councils in the country, considerably less.
All right. Any other comment in terms of the item 7 that's in the agenda, please? If not, we have a recommendation the report be received. Can I have a mover, Ben?
Sorry, just some more questions, just around the waste-free wander again. Just given the conversation we've had earlier in the piece, are we able to get a report back on how effective the waste-free wander is actually being? I see there's a questionnaire here. I think going down the track, it's going to be up to the committee to review whether it is best to continue to invest in waste-free wander or to provide Enviro schools with some more funding for that broader brush approach. I just see to their point earlier, that one visit to a school is probably less effective than the consistent ongoing relationship. So it would be good to get those two measured up if possible. And then supplementary to that, and to the councillor's point, are we able to get a report back as well on the effectiveness of the community engagement? I see basically the only indication that we get of effectiveness is around post engagement here, which is 86, which is pretty low. And I understand that it's still getting going, but it would be good to see the progressive interaction. I'm not too sure how that reporting would look, but it would be good to give us some confidence that education piece is getting some sort of result, even if it's minimal.
I guess it's, to be honest, it's something I'd be interested to potentially talk to our other teams across the 3 different councils around how we do measure community engagement. As a pipes person, I know how we measure the performance of pipes. I'm not actually great on how we measure community engagement. So something that we'll work through. I am conscious that we want to make sure that we give each program enough time to run for a while, and then essentially at this stage we'd be going back and we'd be getting feedback from the schools around how it worked and whether they were seeing outcomes, how that then translates into drop in contamination levels. Ideally, we want to be tracking that through seeing a reduction in that contamination, but I do expect that's probably going to take up to 12 months before we start to see that starting to drop back. But I'll have a chat to at least the ICC teams in that space. I'm not sure what Gore and SDC have around community engagement as to whether they can give us any direction on early indicators of whether or not you're having impact in that space.
Jason?
You're through the chair. Just, I think one of the things we've got to remember with education too is it's not one versus the other. You need a number of different tools to use. And for example, what is being promoted through Waste Free Wander is considerably different to EnviroSchools. EnviroSchools is more of a type curriculum type based program where you're sort of focusing on the waste. What Waste Free Wander does is quite a sort of a targeted engaging with kids, trying to really get them to buy in. I think it's based around a superhero type theme where she goes in and tries to connect with kids. So there's a number of different tools through education that you need to use. Gren, there's probably some alignment there that could be had across what EnviroSchools are doing. But I'd also just like to raise that back at a couple of meetings ago, we talked about the need to grow that education space with waste minimisation officer space to allow us to be doing more, and that would be something that I think should still be on the radar as we do this. And obviously that's a question about when you have likes of EnviroSchools who are talking about something specific, how do we balance that with what we need as a region to actually make change on the ground in terms of some of our issues, such as contamination, which has come up. Can we do that better through waste minimisation officers that are out there trying to improve things, or is it through an EnviroSchools program, or is it through the combination of education and enforcement? There's a number of different factors that are going into this to try and get a positive outcome for our communities.
Thank you.
Fully understand that. I guess it's just coming back to Councillor Pottinger's point around, there's a whole lot of education here, but I would have to go ahead and believe Councillor Pottinger and say it's not working because I have nothing in front of me that says otherwise. And just to that effectiveness around the Waste Free Wander, there is a questionnaire here. So I guess it's once that program's been running, what those questionnaires look like and ultimately what the teachers think. Because if they don't think it's effective, then our money's probably best spent elsewhere. And to that continued investment piece as well, I totally agree. But it would be good just to have some facts and figures of where we should be investing and where not. But fully understand that's difficult to get.
Well, it is, and we've just started to get these education programs up and running again because they haven't been for some time. So credit to staff to get them up and running. We probably need to get a bit of time in that before we can really determine how we measure it.
A key component is the appointment of a WasteNet manager. How is that progressing?
So there's that advert's currently with a recruitment firm as well as being publicly advertised at the moment.
Thank you. All right, so can I have a mover and a seconder then for the motion that the report be received? Moved by Ben, seconded by Rob. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, against, carried. Item 8, waste minimisation community grants. There is a report there that sets out in a bit more detail. Are there any questions arising from that report, please? I have one in terms of it will close, be open to the public until the 16th of September. What process is then followed? Does it come back to us as a group, or is there some other process?
We're working through that at the moment. We've actually got a staff meeting on Thursday this week to talk through next steps with the process. How these are generally run, though, in terms of the community grant programs that I'm aware of that currently exist within council, is that there's often a mix. Some of them go to a full governance board to decide. Some are decided at a staff level and then reported on back to the board. What we need to decide is how we want to take that approach.
Ian?
Could it be used if you had a club of any sort that wanted to do a cleanup? Like, take for example, Invercargill Sandy Point area, you know, which has a huge amount of people through it, and there is crap lying around. If they did a big cleanup, is that something that a club could apply to do, and obviously get a grant? You know, get like as a fundraiser.
It would all come down to what applications we receive, and then that committee deciding on which are the most worthwhile applications to go forward with, depending on how many we get. Obviously, if we get less than the total amount of money available, absolutely. If we get more than the total number of available, then we'll be looking at those priorities and which proposed activities best meet the objectives.
It's just that litter is, someone raised it before, litter is getting more prominent in those areas, and it's a real shame. So is litter a waste net thing, or is that more of an individual council thing? I mean, obviously we're in waste diversion and all that, but do we do litter, or is it not in our scope?
It's not something that WasteNet has had as a objective. The key, I'll bring us, I guess, back to the key objectives of WasteNet is around having efficient joint contracts for the management of waste and recycling. So that's the initial focus. Then we obviously have that education piece around trying to minimise. To date, we haven't had a consolidated, I guess, litter campaign that we've been looking at.
Okay, so it's really goes to the infrastructure of each council. I mean, obviously, someone could say it's a form of waste diversion from landfill. You know, I mean, if you put it in your streets, in your bushes, it's not going to landfill, but it's not flash. And I'm doing a lot of walking of the dog at the moment, and it was quite noticeable out at Sandy Point and just around our streets.
So to date, and I'm happy to have any other comments from other staff, is that usually we would handle that through our parks and reserves team, our roading teams for roadside rubbish, our CBD teams for tidy up.
So it's not a waste net thing. Yeah.
And that's the same for SDC.
Christine?
Sorry, my question around the litter was just the relationship to education and starting this. And I think as a group of councils, we could take a focus on that. I mean, strictly speaking, it's not in the parameters of this, but it is related. And it may be that we can't do it, but to have a focus on that as to whether we can or can't, I'd be interested in finding out, particularly around the education component.
Any other feedback in terms of that report? So we will, I guess, for the August meeting, hear more about that and the process going forward. So can I have, if there's no further comment, mover and a seconder, that the information be received. Moved in, second. Rob, thank you. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Item 9 is merely to note that our next meeting will be at the 11th of September at the Gore District Council. So that brings us to the end of the public portion of the agenda. And I'd like to move that the public now be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings, namely the items that are listed in the agenda and the general subject of matter to be considered while the public's excluded and the reasons for it. The specific grounds under the Local Government and Meetings Information Act are as follows. The item is the presentation on proposed pelletizer plant, and we are going into public excluded to protect information where the making of the information would be likely to be unreasonable to prejudice the commercial position of a person who supplied or is subject to the information. So staff may, who are present, may remain, as well as we having a presentation coming from Recycle South, and that is from yourself. Or just take a short adjournment for a couple of moments, please, and then we'll reconvene.